Hi, my name is Kathy DeVoe, and I'm a retired teacher, and I'm a friend of the library patron, and I love Hatch Public Library. I'm going to read a book today that involves some of my favorite things. One is my grandchildren, one is books, look at them all, and another is knitting. I love to knit. This book is called Leave Me Alone. It's by Vera Brosgol, and Vera also did the illustrations for which she got a Caldecott honor for her illustrations. This crabby old lady here says, "Leave me alone." Big, big letters. Once there was an old woman. She lived in a small village in a small house with a very big family. And if you count all the kids on these pages, 30 grandchildren. Winter was coming. That meant she had some very important knitting to do, but it wasn't getting done. Her grandchildren were very curious about her knitting. Were you supposed to hit the ball of yarn with a stick? Could you eat it? Could you make your brother eat it? Why did the ball get smaller and smaller as you chased it? The old woman was at the end of her rope, or in this case, yarn. So she made her bed as neatly as she could. She swept the floorboards until they more or less shone. She drank tea from her samovar, and that's this fancy urn here. She packed up her things in a big sack, and as she left, she shouted back, "Leave me alone!" And these are her family members all looking at her leave with that big sack. The old woman walked through the deep, dark forest. She made a fire so that she could see what she was doing. She sat down and began to knit. The bear family was very curious and about the light from her fire and about what she might taste like. "Leave me alone," the old woman shouted. But they didn't listen because bears don't speak English. So she picked up her sack and left. The old woman climbed up the mountainside. It was cold, so she found a small, sheltered place. Then she sat down and began to knit. The mountain goats were excited to have a visitor, especially one that brought snacks. You know, goats will eat anything. "Leave me alone," the old woman shouted. But the goats were too busy fighting over the red ones, which they all agreed were the best. So she picked up her sack and left. The old woman climbed higher and higher up the mountain. She reached the top and climbed onto the moon. She found a rock that was shaped like a chair. She sat down and began to knit. The little green moon men had never seen a woman before, old or otherwise. They examined her with a handheld scanner that went beep boop, beep boop. "Leave me alone," the old woman shouted. But the little green moon men couldn't hear her because they didn't have any ears. So she picked up her sack and left through a wormhole. The void on the other side of the wormhole was very dark and very, very quiet. She was absolutely, completely, utterly alone. It was perfect. Soon she had no more yarn and 30 little sweaters. And she was alone. So she put the 30 sweaters into her big sack. She swept up the void until it was nice, matte black. She had a cup of tea from her samovar. Then she picked up the sack and left through another wormhole. When she came out the other side, everything was just as she had left it. And she didn't say a word. All of the children are getting their little sweaters from their grandma. And look, she's smiling. Probably one of the first times she smiled. Sometimes you want to be alone, and sometimes you don't. Sometimes you have to be alone, and sometimes you don't. So this afternoon, I think when I will probably be alone, can't see my grandkids today, maybe I'll read a book, or maybe I'll start knitting. Maybe I'll start knitting. I think I'll knit something red. Isn't that what the goat said? Red was best? Bye.